All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're talking about a ruler who inherited, well, a complete and total catastrophe. We're talking about an empire that was literally on the brink of disappearing. This is the story of Muhammad I, the sultan who didn't just rule an empire, he had to rebuild it from scratch.
So, let me just ask you this to set the scene. What happens when a huge, powerful empire just shatters overnight? I mean, its leader is captured, its armies are crushed. This isn't some hypothetical question. It's exactly what happened to the Ottoman Empire at the very beginning of the 15th century.
Okay, so picture this. The year is 1402. At the Battle of Ankara, the supposedly unstoppable Ottoman Sultan Bayezid the Thunderbolt is defeated and actually captured by the legendary conqueror Timur. This one event, this single defeat, kicks off a whole decade of chaos known as the Ottoman Interregnum. And what's an interregnum? Well, it's a brutal 10-year-long civil war where Bayezid's own sons literally tear the empire to pieces fighting each other for the throne.
Now, this period, this interregnum, it pushed the Ottoman state to the absolute edge. I mean, this wasn't just another crisis. This was a fight for the very survival of the empire.
The collapse was total. Any central authority? Gone. Huge chunks of territory they had conquered in Anatolia and the Balkans? Lost. Local governors who were supposed to be loyal? Yeah, they started acting like their own little kings. And right at the center of this mess, you have four brothers locked in a fight to the death. The Ottoman state wasn't just weak, it was actively falling apart.
But out of all that wreckage, one of those brothers would eventually claw his way to the top. He wouldn't just be the conqueror of his siblings, but the unifier of a completely broken realm.
11 years. Just think about that. That's how long the civil war dragged on. For over a decade, Muhammad fought his own brothers, Suleiman, Isa, and Musa, in this relentless, bloody struggle to piece back together everything his father had lost. This was no quick and easy path to the throne. And then, finally, in 1413, the fighting stopped. Muhammad was the last man standing. And his victory, you have to understand, it wasn't just a personal win. It was the event that finally put an end to the interregnum. It restored the idea that his family had the right to rule, and it gave the entire empire a second chance at life.
So here's the really crucial thing to get about him. Muhammad was a totally different kind of ruler than his father. Bayezid was your classic conqueror, all about expansion, big wars, glory. Muhammad couldn't afford any of that. He had to be a restorer, a consolidator, a pragmatist. His main job wasn't about winning new lands, it was about desperately holding on to the ones he had left.
Which brings us to the real heart of the story. How in the world did he actually do it? How do you go about rebuilding a state that's been shattered into 1,000 pieces? Well, he didn't just react to problems as they came up. He had a clear, methodical plan. You can really think of it as a 3-step program for saving an empire. Step 1, fix the government. Step 2, fix the army. And Step 3, make sure nobody attacks you while you're busy fixing everything else. So first things first, he had to rebuild the government itself. He came down hard on those independent governors, reminding them who was in charge. He reorganized the state departments, which were a total mess. And most importantly, he brought back the Aymar system. This was an absolute genius idea, where you grant land to soldiers in exchange for their military service. It was the very backbone of the state's power, and he got it working again. Okay, next up, the army. The Civil War had splintered the military. You had factions loyal to different princes. Muhammad knew he had to stop that. He restored iron discipline, especially in the elite Janissary Corps, and he made it crystal clear that the entire army's loyalty was to one person and one person only: him, the Sultan. Because without a unified, loyal army, another civil war was pretty much guaranteed.
And finally, step 3. And this one shows you just how smart and pragmatic he was. Muhammad knew the empire was incredibly fragile. It couldn't handle any grand military adventures. So what did he do? He deliberately avoided big wars. He made peace with his neighbors, not because he was weak, but because he was strategic. He knew the empire desperately needed time to heal on the inside.
But of course, just as things were starting to look stable, a new and really dangerous threat popped up. And this time, it wasn't a foreign army or a rival brother. It came from within the very fabric of society itself. This was the Sheikh Bedruddin Revolt.
And look, this wasn't just another peasant uprising. It was a powerful ideological movement. This guy, Bedreddin, he was a super charismatic scholar, and he preached this radical message of social equality and communal ownership of property. Now, for the poor and the angry, that sounded pretty good. But for the Ottoman state, it was a direct threat to the entire social and political order they were trying to rebuild.
And his response is captured perfectly by this quote. He was faced with this popular movement, one rooted in some pretty powerful religious and social ideas, and Muhammad chose the state. He saw this revolt as a threat to the very unity he had fought so hard for, and he crushed it without mercy. For him, political necessity, the survival of the empire, came before absolutely everything else.
So, when you look back, how do you judge a ruler like this? A sultan who didn't lead massive conquests, but instead spent his entire reign just putting out fires and rebuilding the foundations.
You know, historians have asked this for centuries. With no major expansion, no glorious victories, does his reign count as a step backward? Was this a period of Ottoman decline? The answer is a hard no, an emphatic no. The decline, the disintegration, all of that happened before he took the throne. His reign was the exact opposite. It was a period of recovery, of reconstruction, of rebirth. He didn't oversee the collapse. He was the one who stopped it cold.
This right here is the best summary of what he did. He inherited a chaotic collection of warring provinces, and he left behind a single, functioning, centralized state. He didn't just put a bandage on the wound. He performed the life-saving surgery the empire needed to survive.
And for this incredible achievement, history has given him a very special title, the second founder of the Ottoman Empire. Think about it. The first founder, Osman, he created it. But Muhammad I, he's the man who saved it from being totally wiped off the map. He basically had to found it all over again.
When it all comes down to it, his legacy is the very foundation he built. By ending that horrific civil war, by reunifying the realm, by restoring the state's authority, he made everything that came next possible. The huge conquests of his son, Murad II, and his grandson, Mehmed the Conqueror, yep, the guy who would go on to capture Constantinople, all of that was built on the stable ground that Muhammad I so carefully and painfully put back together. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Who do you think is more important to history? The visionary conqueror who expands an empire to its greatest heights, or the pragmatic restorer who saves that same empire from disappearing altogether? It's a really interesting question to chew on.